Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here with us. It's an honor and a pleasure for you to join us during this panel discussion. We're going to be talking about something that hasn't really been delved in too much in detail in India, and that's the topic of collectible design. And I think it's important to first understand what is collectible design. It's an important question to answer. Is it art? Is it furniture? Is it something that has form and function? Is it art and furniture together? The designer who's creating it is seeing it as a piece of art. The person who might be buying it might be seeing it as a piece of furniture. So it's important to define what is collectible design. Another important question is, who decides what is collectible furniture? So on this panel, we have a very well curated lot. We have the perfect blend of an Indian art gallery with someone leading the helm from a very global perspective. We have a global collectible gallery with an Indian designer as part of it. So I think it'll be interesting to get into this niche that hasn't really been delved into in the past. So Lily, I'm going to ask my first question. First of all, welcome to India, and I hope you're having a good time over here. If you could tell everyone a little bit more about the Invisible Collection, how you came about as a collector's gallery, I'll give you my mic, and what you envision for the company in India.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, thank you very much for welcoming Invisible Collection in India. So Invisible Collection is an online gallery, but we also have physical galleries in New York, Los Angeles, Paris, and London. And it was created because of our obsession for beautiful homes and our desire to celebrate the creativity and the skill that come together to create these beautiful homes. So both the designer, like Ashiesh, and the ateliers that are needed to create these interiors and these spaces. And so we represent interior designers from all over the world and the ateliers that they work with to create the most beautiful collectible furniture pieces.
Will you tell me a short version of why it's called the Invisible Collection? I know it has a very interesting story.
Of course. So Invisible Collection is actually a book from Stefan Zweig, who is an Austrian writer from the 30s in Europe and then in the US. And it's a quite sad story, but a beautiful story about a collector who becomes blind, but keeps his love and obsession for his art collection that he can no longer see, but can still imagine. And for Invisible Collection, the reason why we called it the Invisible Collection is because it was furniture that was already very iconic, that had been designed by interior designers like Ashiesh for their private clients that we could see all over magazines like Art Deco and social media and so on, but it was completely private. Nobody else but the client of the interior designer could purchase that furniture. There was no channel of distribution for these beautiful pieces. So we decided to work with interior designers and provide a platform for them to be able to sell their furniture all over the world and now in India.
And I'm so glad you did that, so we have access to the works of Ashiesh Shah, even if he's not doing our home. So Tarini, next question for you. As an Indian collectible design gallery, could you share the story behind opening Echo? I know it's a beautiful story, its values and its purpose in India and around the world.
So I grew up in a family where my grandmother and mother have been supporting the arts and culture for the last 40 years. And I wanted to continue in their legacy and leave something and do something with craft. And for the last 10 years, I was going to Design Miami, Paris, all the shows globally. And I said, why is there a gallery not representing Indian craftsmanship? We are a country of makers. That's who we are, and we have been since the Mughals and even before that. And I met Florence in Paris one rainy morning in December, and I said, Florence, will you move? And will you try this with me? And we had no gallery. We didn't know if we wanted to open a gallery. We just wanted to try and see where we got. She moved in Feb of 2020 and India locked down in March. And we were stuck in Vijayanagar where my father's steel factory is. And my mom sent us on a CSR mission to all the villages around to see what was going on, see how we could help. And she was like, there's this beautiful black pot tree, let's do something with it. Florence, you're here, let's make a workshop. So we had 20 villagers come. We had nothing better to do, so we experimented. And actually, my first phone call was to Ashiesh. And I was like, Ashiesh, we made this amazing vase. Do you want to use it in Bombay? And he was like, yeah, send me like whatever you have, and I'll use it in all my projects. I don't know if you remember. And we were like, okay, this is great. And for us, it was amazing because those people from that village, which is below the poverty line, could have a space in a project like Ashiesh's in Bombay. And we knew we were onto something. And then we met Jean-Francois Lesage, and we experimented with his atelier very nicely. And I see Malvika here. But, you know, it was just amazing the kind of support we garnered. And we were like, okay. And then we opened a gallery. And in our first year of opening in Bombay in February, we were at Pat Paris in March. And it was, so it's been a really interesting journey. We're super young. We have a long way to go. But for us, it's about representing Indian craftsmanship at its highest level in the world.
I love that it started from a grassroots level and it set your purpose and your intent from day one, where you are starting from craftsmanship and then developing from there. So very lovely to hear that. Hi, Ashish. Next question for you. You're the only Indian designer to be part of the Invisible collection, and I know you work closely with artisans as well. Could you walk us through your creative process? I want to know what goes on in here when you're designing, and how you decide on what your design should be, keeping an Indian and global perspective in mind.
It's a tough question because I still don't know what goes on in my mind. But I feel like I always experiment. I think the ethos was, 10 years ago, actually 8.5 years ago when we started the atelier, we were more like a research cell and we were asking questions. We didn't know much. So we did a little bit of travel and then we asked questions, and then I always wanted to make sculpture, but we didn't know how to, and it was some kind of a marriage at that point, and we experimented and some failed, most failed and some worked, right? But even today, like when we are starting a collection or starting a work, I never think of function. I always think of beauty, aesthetics, craft, and a kind of a dance between all of this. And then if there's functionality, then it kind of crosses a barrier. But again, that question of does function define design is a big question, for me at least. And I feel like art is bracketless, and I think that journey, if one continues, at some point we find answers, but otherwise it's a very, very fluid space.
So hard to define what is a collectible design.
Yeah, I think it should not be defined, no? I think it should be the process and the piece, or the artist who can define that. You know, I think there's lots that a piece might be good looking, but it could be made without craftsmanship. And does that become collectible? Because then that can go into, you can then turn that and say it's a beautiful piece and let's keep it an open edition and then let the world enjoy it. And that could still be collectible because, I mean, it's been done in the past when you see Noguchi's work, you know. So there is a history of collectible design from long. It's just that now people are waking up to it. And just because it had function, did that make it less of an art form is the big question to ask.
A big question with no answer as such, right?
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
As each person feels.
But that's where galleries come into play, right? Because
Yeah.
then they control that narrative, they bring that narrative to the audience that they're talking to.
So in terms of control, how do you decide how many editions each piece should have? Do you decide? Does the gallery decide?
Very tough question, I think. So for me, I'll tell you how I kind of design. Obviously, we speak to gallerists, you know,
Yeah.
they do advise on a lot of things. I think it's a very, very strong relationship that one holds. But I also feel that for our atelier, it's also craft-based. So if a craft is really difficult and a piece is really difficult to make and we don't know if the second or the third or the fourth piece will actually happen in the same kind of quality, then we reduce either we make it unique or we reduce the edition number. Or if we say, wow, we've been able to master this very, very well, and now we can increase the employment in the village context or in that context of non-displacement of craftspeople, I think then we can create more of it and increase their productivity through multiple ways.
So it's piece by piece. You
I
have to
think
take it
for me, it's piece by piece. Yeah.
So, Florence, I need to ask you, you bring designers from around the world to rural parts of India, also working with the artisans and the craftsmen in India. So, could you tell us how do you bridge two cultures together and use a design language that an Indian artisan would traditionally know and blend it with someone coming from the US or Europe and making them communicate and create a product that is loved globally?
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, so I think there is no design without craftsmanship, obviously. And when it comes to creativity, and that's what I love so much about Eco's mission, is that you don't really have languages like words anymore that is really required. And that creativity, can just go over borders. And so what we do is always, you just have to feed basically the designer and the workshop, the techniques, with a common language. Now, what is this language? It's obviously a lot of pictures, a lot of processes, a lot of research into the history of, of the craft or a specific shape, or specific techniques. And I think our role is just to create this little net, and for the designer and the technique just to start together and take off. And hopefully the designer takes his own, inspirations and ideas from that, and the techniques also evolve according to that. So, yeah, I think the answer is passion. If you don't have the passion, if you're counting your time, if you, if you have too many expectations at the beginning of the process, it might not work if you install this collaboration, into the right net, which is, I hope, Eco. We have the bridge between both cultures.
Have you had any experience where communication is difficult and the designer that you've brought on board is struggling to communicate that to the artisan here? How have you sort of bridged that gap?
Yeah, I mean, we have that absolutely all the time. I think that's part of the, the biggest challenge, but also the biggest proud that we have afterwards when we have the collections with us, in the gallery for the solo show, and then the collection that we take to other fairs in other countries. So this is our everyday struggle, but that's the beauty of it. But again, with a lot of, we just test different kind of communication. Sometimes it just starts with sketches and technical drawings. If this is not working, we might ask the designer to just create a model, that he would ship to India or come to India. Recently we have hosted a French designer called Froehlicher, and it's just been 2 weeks entirely, in a workshop together working with a Doka artisan. So we just found a solution for all of that all the time, but it's a bespoke story for every designers and workshop we're working with. There is just not one way.
I'm sure you're constantly troubleshooting between just a communication gap and an exposure gap that happens between two people from different backgrounds. So since we are talking about exhibitions and we are at an exhibition, it's only fair that I ask you, and since you brought up PAD as well, Eco retails in India and participates in exhibitions all around the world. What are the key similarities and differences that you see between India and other markets for collectibles?
So I think the similarity is obviously the love of design and craftsmanship. And I think, but the main difference is abroad, the designers are actually also makers. The galleries don't really produce the works. They're produced by the designers. And in our case, because we want to make in India, and we only want to make in India, we're not representing global brands that want to show in India. We're not representing other designers who don't want to create in India. I think that's a big difference, that we actually do all the R&D. We do everything ourselves, and we produce their, we work together to come up with their designs. We have a lot of limitations on our craft. The workshops are very rural. The tools are not available. So Echo steps in, the foundation steps in. We support all of that to make it possible to scale up, scale down, reinvent the craft, contemporize the craft. But so that's the main difference. But the love of craftsmanship, passion, I think that's the similarity.
Right, so I think that's the huge difference between how you run collectible design and how Invisible runs collectible design. And Ashish, I'm going to throw the question back at you. You are leading the industry by being the first Indian to showcase your work at a gallery on a global platform. What made you want to do it? And why do you think others should follow in the same footsteps? And what exposure has it brought to you? Don't say tough question.
No, it's not. It's a complicated question because I feel like I always, it was a dream to have Indian crafts go global, and I think we all share the same.
That's a similar narrative
It's a
going
similar
around.
narrative. I think it's also because I think we all believe in it in a much larger way. But I think the way I worked was, I think I was very clueless, to be honest. I mean, to be fair, I didn't know much. So every step, every day was a new learning. And this was not my main profession. To be honest, I'm an architect and interior designer. So I had to carve out a lot of time to first start doing this. Because if I was like, if I'm going to make 3 pieces a year, then this is okay, I can just go ahead. But if I want to make this into a full-time atelier, then I need to step out of my office, make a physical space, which I had to do. We run 2 different offices now. And that was the start of taking my job seriously. And once you start, you have bills to pay, So I think then you have to figure out how to not be, I would say, how to be ethical about it and not scale up in a way that you can ruin your practice at some point. So then came the idea of finding newer markets, because India is very nascent at this point. Yes. And people don't understand collectible design. I think this room full of people are probably the majority of the people who understand collectible, So you can imagine a country like India with so many of us, what is there, what is the market as of now? I think we are very nascent. I think this group is going to go down in history to be able to, and this group, the conversations here will go down in history as the landmark conversation of steps to collectible design, because what we are speaking right now is the future for India. Right. And so my first thing was when Invisible Collection, we started working together, I was asking them questions: how do other architects work? How does it happen? What should I do? And I think those valuable information really helped us on controlling quality, going back to the workshops and seeing how we can improve things. Because when you're working with craftspeople, they don't necessarily they have the tools, as Tarini said, but sometimes the finish is not right. So you have to constantly keep on working, and that is not economically viable. So because then there's so much time that goes through, and you're like, oh God, we haven't sold a single piece. So initially it was very tough. I think now we've built a small clientele that understands all our work and collects from all of us. But so I think that when we started working with Invisible, we started understanding a wider audience. We started selling abroad. We started getting feedback. We started working with architects internationally. And that's when I really realized the potential of this bracket, or a bracketless space.
So then I have to ask you, what's your first love? Is it designing homes or designing products?
I can't choose between my 2 children.
Yesterday I was with a great Indian collector, and she said that Ashish is an artist more than an architect. And she said that very positively, say that you really are an artist and you need to realize that you are that creative and talented.
Thank you.
There you go. We answered the question for you then. And Lily, I'm going to put you on the spot. It's not part of the questions, but since we are talking about markets and India is at such a young stage and has such a small community for collectible design, you have a very global perspective. Which market in the world is thriving and highly adoptive to this idea? and which are the other markets that you think are emerging?
Well, first, of course, I have to talk about the United States of America because that's our biggest market, and it's a market that is extremely mature but also growing very, very fast. And India, of course, and that's the reason why we're here. I was in London in the home of an Indian client a couple of weeks ago, and he was showing me his apartment and saying, everything has to go. I want to throw out all of the furniture that I have in this apartment. And I said, but it looks so new. He said, yes, I've redesigned my home 2 years ago, but my taste has evolved so much in the last 2 years, everything has to go. And I think this just shows how fast clients are evolving and that taste is being more and more informed. And I think private clients, collectors in India are growing and learning about craftsmanship and international design so fast and much faster than anywhere in the world right now.
All I heard was someone wants to change their house every 2 years.
I don't think they want to do it every 2 years, but right now they just realize, okay, there's a huge world outside of what I've done with my house right now.
Yeah. So, Florence, I'm going to ask you, I know you collaborate with a lot of designers. How do you select who you're going to collaborate with? And have you had any interesting experiences you can share?
So obviously, first, there is an aesthetic matters from the craft perspective, but also from the designer perspective. Looking at the craft from India, I mean, there are so many. It's absolutely insane. And I think that's the best excitement, to look at like a specific technique, so traditional, that you could project, like with such an other way, but respecting 100%, of the technique, but just like thinking of, oh my God, like that designer would match so perfectly, with that process, for instance. And then from the designer perspective, obviously also an aesthetic choice. But I think the more important is the mindset, like the mentality of both worlds, because if you're not ready to collaborate, again, if you're not ready to if you're counting your time, it does not exist. Like, I think one of the best projects that we are the more proud of is the collaboration that we've done with Mohamed Abdul Raoud, in the Bidar village, where we did this beautiful project around Bidri, and we worked with this French designer, Boris Bruchet, for the illustration. And it took us like 2 years to get the very first piece. So from the beginning of the collaboration, going there, establishing, the idea, finding the illustrator, like this entire process altogether was a 2-year process for one piece that we had then like duplicated, in several series that are all limited edition of 3 pieces, exactly as Ashish explained. But sometimes like the craftsmanship in itself, it's quite complex, and it's not something that in any case you could project, for 100th time, So like, I think if you're not ready, like once we found the right aesthetic, the right potential, we just go on with people, who can just carry on with our story, with the timing. We are never able to give any timing. Like every time the designers, when we collaborate with them, are like, when are we going to organize the show? I have delivered, like this collection. When can we expect the pieces to happen? And it's impossible to answer. It's been 3 years now that we are like collaborating, producing like a super like short edition pieces, and still now we still never know, and that's what we love. I believe that's what makes also the pieces so unique, and this is what brings like this diversity, into one single furniture that can carry these stories. So to get back to the reason why and how do we select designers and techniques to work together is only based on, like how far are you able to go with us and how open-minded you are.
And I'm curious to know, do you look for designers outside of India or within India as well?
We do both. Mainly at the beginning it was outside, because I think just by definition, Tarini and I being like from 2 different cultures, and me coming to India and being like so excited, to discover so many crafts, which is something that does not even exist anymore in Europe. Like, in France, I know by culture, my own craft. So when you come as a stranger to a country and discover so much craft, so much potential, obviously the first thought was just like, okay, like we cannot we cannot explore all of that just the two of us, you know. So we have to call more people in the project. We need to collaborate. We need to open up those opportunities to other people. And by establishing also ourselves, you know, I got to know also a lot of people here around in Mumbai with fascinating projects and also relationship with materiality that were also new. Like, for instance, we just launched that exhibition with the Chama, which is like an entire show about rubber. And Sudhir, for instance, like, he also envisioned that material, you know, in another matter, which is exactly what we do at Eco. So he came with exactly the same processes and the same mindset. So it was just the perfect match also for us, you know, to collaborate.
And also, Tarini, when I was talking to you on the phone a few days ago, you said something interesting. When you think of Indian heritage or Indian craft, you think of an Indian person looking at the craft and trying to reinvent it. But what you had mentioned on the phone is you'd like to bring someone from outside India to see our Indian craft because they see it from fresh eyes. And that I hadn't thought of. So I thought that was a very interesting point you had said on the phone. So, Lily, back to you. Collecting art has evolved as a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's gone on for decades. Collectible art is still in its nascent stage, and it hasn't reached the billion-dollar mark yet. Given your global perspective, where do you see the future of collectible design going, and what do you see as some of the challenges?
I mean, collecting has always existed throughout history of the world. And there has been this idea of collecting art is more important than collecting furniture, but I don't think that that is the case anymore. We don't make the difference between art and we don't make the difference between art and furniture anymore. As you said, it starts as art and then it becomes practical and it's called furniture. But for us, when we look at collectibles and the future of collecting, I think it's very much how do you relate with the piece of furniture that you see. And also I think that more and more collectors are living with the pieces that they buy. Nobody wants to live in a museum anymore, which is perhaps the way that people were collecting design more in the past, like really, really large, very big pieces. And now I think that it's very much what are the emotions that this piece of furniture brings to your day-to-day. And so when we think of collectible design, we look at the cultural relevance of that piece, we look at where it's made, who makes it, we look at the creativity and the knowledge of the designer. For example, Ashiesh knows everything about art and history of art, and he's so knowledgeable. And so I think that really is transferred in his work because it just follows in the history of art and design. So I think, collecting is very much a journey for each person.
Ashish, I'm going to put you on the spot a bit. Since you have a pulse on the industry, what do you think is the biggest challenge in India for collectible design?
Plagiarism.
Plagiarism. Everyone is inspired very heavily. Is that what it is?
I think it's important to have a good, an interesting voice, and I think the question that you asked, both of them, that what defines, or, you know, which artist makes the cut, is originality, and I think that is very important. The fact that the voice is that person's own, and I think if that doesn't translate well into that practice, then that's an issue. But the problem is if that translates well and it gets into a system where, and I think even fashion faces the same, right? There's fast fashion that does the same thing.
Yeah.
But the problem here is that not only the designer loses business, the crafts loses business. So I think when we make something out of craft, and all of us on this platform work very closely with crafts, and if that gets plagiarized in another material, if it gets plagiarized in craft, okay, you know, fair. But if in another material which is probably non-biodegradable, that's a huge problem.
It beats the purpose of using the craft.
Yeah.
Okay. And Tarini, since you're at the forefront of Indian collectible design, how do you think we can push this forward, at least for the next 5 to 10 years? How do you push collectible design forward in India?
So I think collectible design globally started about 20, 22 years ago by the Carpenters Workshop. They were one of the first galleries that started. And they started because, you know, art collectors wanted interesting pieces of furniture. They didn't want the normal, you know, Italian furniture anymore. And I think India is going to get there because we have a very strong art market now and it's only growing. And once it grows to a certain degree and once you've bought the art that you would like to buy,
Right.
collectible design is next. People who have every artist on their walls, where do they spend their money? Where do they change their chair or their sofa? So it'll be one piece at a time. But like I was hearing the managing director of Kohler speak, and he said McKinsey has labeled us as one of the fastest growing cities in the world that's going to contribute to global GDP. So it's coming, it's bright.
I completely agree. I think all of us interior designers and architects have seen a boom in the Indian industry in the last 2-3 years, especially after COVID. It's like everything has just blown up in terms of exhibitions and in terms of product designing and in terms of what people want in their homes. So I think it's coming, we're getting there. So hopefully next time I ask you the question and say which is the biggest market, it'll be India and not the United States of America, hopefully 10 years from now. So I'm going to ask you a few rapid fire questions. Same question for all 4 of you. We'll go in a line. And I haven't sent these to you. This is on the spot. If you could collaborate with any designer, past or present, who would it be? Who wants to go first?
Corbusier.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
We have 250 designers on Invisible Collection and over 350 ateliers, so...
Maybe someone who's passed away then, so there is no bias.
I mean, we actually believe that a lot of the designers that we represent will become the next Jean Royer, Jean-Michel Franck, Pierre Charot, and so on in, 50, 100 years. So that would probably be my references.
Okay.
Joseph Durand.
Okay.
And I will follow up with Lily with another designer called André Putman, who was like an incredible lady who brought actually, she did a little bit the opposite of what we're doing because she canceled, like the kind of luxury sense of design, and she brought back actually the simplicity, like luxury design into a very simple market. And it was a big chapter
like
also
luxury?
of design.
Is that what you mean?
Like, like expensive furnitures and all of that. And that instead of keep doing that, there was just a moment of her life where she broke, that rule and started like designing collections for shops, supermarket, like this really easy, accessible design with this also idea that good design doesn't always have a price. And that was also a very inspiring, I think, woman for design in the European culture.
Good design that's affordable as well.
Yes.
Got it. So next question. What's one design trend you hope never makes a comeback? Thank you. This is rapid fire, guys. You can't take so long.
Okay, I know. Cubism.
Okay, there we go. Anyone else?
Kitsch.
Kitsch.
I agree with Ashish.
I completely agree with this.
Because I think with kitsch, everything is great. Like everything is fabulous if it's kitsch. And you're like, what is the
Doesn't work like
language?
that.
There's no language. You just put everything together and it somehow
kitsch.
works.
For me, it would be plastic. There was a time in the 70s where everything was plastic, and I hope this never comes back.
Good answer. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, last question to put you on the spot. What is your favorite piece of furniture in your own home? Wow, guys.
I think my Pierre Genre chair.
Yeah, what do you like about it?
It reminds me of where I come from. It reminds me of teak wood and cane and simplicity and simpleness.
Okay, fair enough.
For me, it's a Charles Anna table lamp that he actually gifted to me and that I adore. It has this beautiful wicker shade and it's in ceramic and you can see the green glazing that's very imperfect, just, dripping all over the place. It's beautiful.
So it's a heritage item for you, maybe goes off to the next generation.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I have a Charlotte Perriand triangular table, very simple, in oak from her Japanese series, which is for me like the most humble piece of design. It's all about construction and angles. And I feel like even in a triangular shape, which is probably the most difficult shape to work with, the way she's managed to bring curves is incredible. So, and just the joinery of it, because she made it in Japan at that point.
So you appreciate the craftsmanship that's gone into it.
I appreciate that merger of minimalism, art, and craftsmanship.
Sounds a lot like collectible design.
Charlotte.
Yes. And what
Yeah,
about you?
and for me, that would be my coffee table, which we've made the day of the lockdown in Mumbai. When we moved, actually, our apartment was absolutely empty. And from a day to another, I don't know if you remember, obviously, but it was the lockdown, right? Like all the stores shut. And we just went down the street and there were like a marble shop and we just bought some broken pieces of marble and we went to the other places in front of him who was doing some welding. We asked the guy to weld some fits and we made like super quickly a low table, with those broken pieces and still welded, etc. And we actually fell in love with the shape of that table and we still have it with us and we absolutely love it.
Sometimes,
so like the spontaneous design also is pretty nice. Yeah.
Spontaneity sometimes brings out the best design.
Exactly.
So I would like to thank four of you for joining us. I hope everyone is walking away a lot more enlightened, a lot more enriched about collectible design and a lot more knowledgeable, and turn it into a conversation so more people become educated about this topic and this niche grows and broadens its horizon in India. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ridhi.